The rain hammered my truck windshield like bullets as I sat in the university parking lot, watching my wife of 5 years walk across that stage. Natalie Miller, MBA, summa cum laude. The announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium speakers, barely audible over the storm that seemed to mirror the knot in my gut. 5 years. 5 goddamn years of night shifts at the Boeing plant. 5 years of ramen noodles and generic beer while she studied at the kitchen table I'd bought secondhand. 5 years of her rolling her eyes when I came home with grease under my fingernails, like my blue-collar existence was some temporary embarrassment she'd eventually shed. Kevin Miller, she'd say to her classmates, my husband, he's supporting me through school. The pause before supporting always lasted just long enough to make it clear I was the help, not the partner. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight we'd celebrate. Tonight the investment would pay off. I watched her pose for photos with her MBA cohort, all sharp suits and sharper smiles. Graham Pierce, her study group leader, had his arm around her waist a little too long for my comfort. Maya Tran, her best friend and fellow cutthroat, whispered something that made Natalie throw her head back and laugh. My phone buzzed. Text from Natalie. Meet me at home, we need to talk. The knot in my gut twisted tighter. Our apartment, my apartment, since I'd been paying the rent while she focused on her career development, felt different when I walked in. Colder, like someone had sucked all the warmth out of the air. Natalie sat at our kitchen table, still in her graduation dress, but she'd changed her shoes from heels to flats. Practical, efficient. A manila envelope sat between us like a landmine. Congratulations, I said, hanging my jacket on the back of a chair. How does it feel to be officially smarter than everyone else? She didn't smile. Kevin, sit down. I'm good standing. But I sat anyway, because something in her voice made my legs feel unsteady. Natalie pushed the envelope toward me with 2 fingers, like it might contaminate her if she touched it too long. I've been thinking about our future. Our future. I repeated the words slowly, tasting them. They felt foreign in my mouth. Okay, what about it? I've outgrown this. She gestured around the apartment, but her eyes stayed on me. I've outgrown us, Kevin. I'm sorry, but it's time to be honest. I stared at her, really looked at her. When had her eyes become so cold? When had her mouth learned to curve into that particular smile, the one that said she knew something you didn't, and she was enjoying the knowledge? Open it, she said. My hands moved without my permission. Inside the envelope, divorce papers, neat, professional, already filled out. All I had to do was sign. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not. Natalie folded her hands on the table like she was conducting a business meeting. Kevin, you're a good man. You really are. But I need more than good. I need someone who can match my ambition, my education level, my prospects. Your prospects. The words came out flat. The prospects I funded. And I appreciate that. I really do. Think of it as an investment that didn't pan out. It happens. I flipped through the papers. She wanted everything. The apartment lease transferred to her name. The car we'd bought together last year. Even the savings account I'd been building for a down payment on a house. This is generous, I said. I think so. I was being sarcastic, Natalie. She shrugged. Kevin, let's not make this harder than it has to be. We both know this marriage was a placeholder. I needed support while I built my career, and you needed someone to make you feel important. We both got what we wanted. Did we? I kept reading. She'd even calculated how to split our wedding gifts. What about the patents? What patents? And there it was. 5 years of marriage, and she'd never once asked about my work beyond whether the paycheck would clear. Never wondered why I spent my weekends tinkering in the garage, why I filed paperwork with the patent office, why I'd quietly started a holding company under my birth name, Kevin James Miller instead of the Kevin Miller she'd married. 23 provisional patents, energy systems, medical devices, water purification technology, all filed during our marriage, all assigned to KJM Holdings, all completely invisible to the woman who'd shared my bed for half a decade. Nothing important, I said. Just some work stuff. Good. So we're clear? I looked at her sitting there in her graduation dress, already planning her new life. Graham Pierce was probably waiting for her call. Maybe Maya had already helped her pick out apartments in the better part of town. Maybe they'd been planning this for months. Kevin? She tapped the papers. I need you to sign. I signed. Every page, every line. I gave her everything she asked for without a fight, without negotiation, without even reading the fine print. When I finished, she smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her all evening. Thank you, she said. This is really for the best. I'm sure it is. You'll find someone more compatible, someone who appreciates the simple life. I stood up and walked to our bedroom, her bedroom now, and started packing. Everything I owned fit into 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box. 5 years of marriage, and I could disappear in 15 minutes. Natalie watched from the kitchen doorway as I loaded my truck. Kevin, I hope you understand this isn't personal. Of course not. I tossed my last bag into the truck bed. Business decision. Exactly. I climbed into the cab and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see her standing in the apartment doorway, already reaching for her phone, probably calling Graham, or Maya, or whoever was next in line for the Natalie Miller experience. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I heard her laugh. Not a cruel laugh exactly, more like relief, like she'd finally shed some dead weight she'd been carrying around. I drove until the city lights disappeared in my rearview mirror, and I kept driving. I didn't go to my mother's house in Spokane. Didn't call my sister Kira. Didn't stop by Brick's boxing gym to say goodbye. Those were the places Natalie would expect me to go, the places she'd look if she ever bothered looking. Instead, I drove east until the highway turned into a thin ribbon cutting through Montana wheat fields. When my gas gauge hit empty, I pulled into a truck stop outside a town called Cedar Falls, population 847, according to the welcome sign that someone had peppered with buckshot. The clerk at the gas station was maybe 19, with the kind of bored expression that comes from watching the same empty road for 8 hours a day. Passing through? He asked. Maybe staying, I said. Know anywhere a man can rent a room? Mrs. Henderson's got a place above the diner, cheap and clean, long as you don't mind the smell of bacon grease. Bacon grease sounded like heaven after 5 years of Natalie's organic, locally sourced, ethically raised everything. Sounds perfect. I paid for my gas and bought a prepaid phone from the rack by the register. Then I walked outside, dropped my old phone in the dumpster, and watched 5 years of contacts and messages disappear under a pile of coffee grounds and cigarette butts. Kevin Miller was dead. Time to figure out who I was going to be instead. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a 70-something widow who asked exactly 2 questions. Could I pay first month's rent in cash, and was I running from the law? When I answered yes and no respectively, she handed me a key and pointed toward the stairs. Breakfast starts at 6, lunch runs till 3, dinner's whatever's left over, she said. You look like you could use some feeding up. The room was small but clean, with a bed, a desk, a mini fridge, and a window that looked out over Main Street. I could see the whole town from up there, the bank, the post office, the farm supply store, the bar where half the population seemed to spend their evenings. I sat on the bed and opened the cardboard box I'd packed. Inside, under my clothes and a few books, was a folder containing copies of every patent application I'd filed over the past 5 years. Energy-efficient heating systems, water purification devices, medical monitoring equipment, all the late-night garage projects Natalie had dismissed as Kevin's little hobby. Each patent was assigned to KJM Holdings, the company I'd registered using my full legal name, Kevin James Miller. The company Natalie didn't know existed because she'd never cared enough to ask. I spread the papers across the desk and started making phone calls. KJM Holdings, this is James Wren speaking. The new name felt strange in my mouth, but it would do. James for my middle name. Wren because I'd always liked birds. They could fly away whenever they wanted, start over somewhere new. Over the next 6 months, I turned those 23 patents into licensing deals. Small companies at first, startups hungry for innovative technology, then bigger fish, a water purification system that caught the attention of a multinational corporation, a heating efficiency design that every major HVAC manufacturer wanted to license. By the end of my first year in Cedar Falls, James Wren was worth $2.3 million. By the end of the second year, $8.7 million. I bought the building next to Mrs. Henderson's diner and converted the ground floor into an office, the upper floors into a proper apartment. I hired a patent attorney in Seattle, an accountant in Denver, a business manager in Chicago. None of them knew Kevin Miller had ever existed. I started working out at the town's tiny gym, hitting the heavy bag until my knuckles bled and my shoulders screamed. The pain felt good, clean. It reminded me I was still alive, still capable of feeling something other than the hollow ache Natalie had left behind. The gym owner, a former Marine named Dave Kowalski, eventually started training me properly. "You've got anger," he said, after watching me destroy 3 heavy bags in 2 months. "Might as well learn to use it right." I learned. Boxing became meditation, each combination a prayer to the god of second chances. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Breathe in, breathe out, forget the woman who'd laughed as you drove away. By year 3, my net worth hit $15 million. I bought a house outside town, nothing fancy, just a place with land and privacy and a workshop where I could build things with my hands. I kept developing patents, kept licensing technology, kept building the fortune that Natalie never knew existed. I also started following her life from a distance. It wasn't stalking, exactly. More like checking stock prices on an investment you'd written off. Natalie had moved in with Graham Pierce, the study group leader with the wandering hands. They'd gotten engaged, then married, then divorced 18 months later when Graham's venture capital firm collapsed under investigation for securities fraud. She'd tried starting her own consulting company, but MBA graduates were a dime a dozen in Seattle. Too much education, not enough experience. The business folded after 8 months. Then she'd married a real estate developer named Marcus Webb, a man 20 years older who seemed impressed by her credentials. That lasted 2 years before Marcus realized that an MBA didn't automatically translate to business sense. Their divorce was messier than ours had been. Lawyers, asset disputes, accusations of infidelity on both sides. By year 5 of my new life, Natalie was 36, twice divorced, and working as a mid-level manager at a tech startup that was bleeding money. Her LinkedIn profile still listed her MBA prominently, but the job titles had gotten progressively less impressive. I felt nothing watching her decline. No satisfaction, no sympathy, no residual anger. She'd become a stranger, a character in a story I'd stopped reading years ago. By year 7, my net worth crossed $40 million. I'd licensed technology to companies in 12 countries, held patents on innovations that were making other people billions. The kid who'd worked night shifts to pay for his wife's education had become one of the most successful anonymous inventors in the country, and still, Natalie had no idea I existed. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October, year 10 of my life as James Wren. I was in my workshop testing a new prototype for a solar energy storage system when my business phone rang. KJM Holdings. Mr. Wren, this is Sarah Chen from Blackstone Legal in Seattle. I represent Natalie Webb, formerly Natalie Miller. I believe you knew her ex-husband. I set down my soldering iron very carefully. I'm sorry, who? Kevin Miller. Our records indicate he was involved in the founding of KJM Holdings before his disappearance 10 years ago. Disappearance. Like I'd been abducted by aliens instead of driven away by a woman who'd outgrown me. I'm afraid you're mistaken. KJM Holdings was founded by Kevin James Miller. Perhaps you have the wrong person. Our research suggests they're the same individual. Your research is incorrect. I kept my voice level, professional. Kevin James Miller is the sole founder and owner of this company. If Ms. Webb has questions about someone else, she'll need to contact someone else. Mr. Wren, my client was married to Kevin Miller for 5 years. She supported him through a difficult period and believes she's entitled to compensation for her contribution to his subsequent success. I almost laughed. What subsequent success? According to our research, Kevin Miller disappeared shortly after his divorce and subsequently founded a technology company that's generated significant wealth. My client believes she has a claim to those assets. Ms. Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Kevin Miller was a factory worker who disappeared 10 years ago. Kevin James Miller is a patent engineer who's never been married. They're different people. Our investigation suggests otherwise. Then your investigation is flawed. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Cedar Falls looked exactly the same as it had the day I'd arrived. Small, quiet, forgotten. But let's say, hypothetically, that you're right. Let's say Kevin Miller and Kevin James Miller are the same person. What exactly would your client be claiming? Partnership interest, unjust enrichment, breach of marital contract. Based on what? Based on her financial and emotional support during the formative period of his career development. This time I did laugh. Her financial support? Ms. Chen, Kevin Miller worked night shifts for 5 years to pay for his wife's MBA. He supported her, not the other way around. That's not how my client remembers it. I'm sure it isn't. I sat back down and picked up my soldering iron. Ms. Chen, let me save you some time. Kevin James Miller owes Kevin Miller's ex-wife exactly nothing. If she wants to pursue this fantasy, she's welcome to try, but she should know that KJM Holdings keeps very detailed financial records. Are you threatening my client? I'm informing her attorney that frivolous lawsuits tend to be expensive for the people who file them. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long moment. 10 years. 10 years of silence. And now Natalie had found me. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The answer came to me 3 days later when Sarah Chen called back. Mr. Wren, I've received some additional information about my client's situation. Oh? It seems there are some discrepancies in her account of the marriage. Financial records suggest that Kevin Miller was indeed the primary breadwinner during their relationship. Imagine that. However, my client still believes she's entitled to some consideration. She's prepared to settle for a reasonable amount. How reasonable? $2 million. I set down my coffee cup and pulled out a legal pad. Ms. Chen, let me tell you what I'm prepared to offer Ms. Webb. I'm listening. An invoice. Excuse me? Kevin Miller supported his wife through 5 years of graduate school, tuition, fees, books, living expenses. He deferred his own education and career development to fund hers. By my calculation, including opportunity cost and interest, she owes him approximately $187,000. The line went quiet for a long moment. Mr. Wren, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. Your client invested nothing in Kevin Miller's success because Kevin Miller's success happened after she abandoned the marriage. She's entitled to nothing because she contributed nothing. In fact, she's in debt. That's not... Ms. Chen, I'm going to hang up now. If your client wants to pursue this matter, she can explain to a judge why she deserves money from a man she divorced for being beneath her ambition. I'm sure that will go well. I hung up and went back to work, but the calls didn't stop. Over the next week, my phone rang constantly. Sarah Chen, Natalie herself, unknown numbers that I let go to voicemail. Finally, I listened to one of the messages. Kevin, it's me. It's Natalie. I know you're angry, and I understand why, but we need to talk. What happened between us? It was complicated. I made mistakes. We both did. But I'm in trouble now, and I need your help. Please call me back. Please. Her voice sounded different, older, tired. The confidence that had carried her through our divorce was gone, replaced by something that might have been desperation. I deleted the message and blocked her number, but she kept trying. Different phones, different numbers. 169 missed calls over 7 days, according to my phone log. Each voicemail a little more desperate than the last. Kevin, I know you can hear these. I know you're there. Kevin, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Kevin, please, I'm losing my apartment. I can't make my car payments. I just need enough to get back on my feet. Kevin, I'll do anything. Anything you want. Just please call me back. On the 7th day, the calls stopped. On the 8th day, Sarah Chen called one more time. Mr. Wren, my client would like to meet with Kevin Miller in person. She's prepared to travel to Montana. Why would she do that? She believes a face-to-face conversation might resolve this matter more amicably. I thought about it. 10 years of building a new life, and now the past wanted a meeting. Maybe it was time to close the book properly. Fine, I said. There's a coffee shop in Bozeman called The Daily Grind, tomorrow at 2 p.m. She gets one conversation. Thank you, Mr. Wren. She'll be there. Ms. Chen, make sure she understands this isn't a negotiation. It's a goodbye. I arrived at The Daily Grind 30 minutes early and chose a table near the back where I could see the entire coffee shop. Old habit from my boxing days. Always know your exits. Always control your environment. At exactly 2 p.m., Natalie walked through the door. 10 years had not been kind to her. The sharp confidence that had carried her through our divorce was gone, replaced by something brittle and desperate. Her clothes were still expensive, probably bought during her brief marriage to the real estate developer. But they hung differently now, like costumes she was wearing instead of armor she'd earned. She scanned the coffee shop until she spotted me, and for a moment, her face lit up with something that might have been relief. Then she saw my expression, and the light died. Kevin, she slid into the chair across from me. You look good. Different, but good. James, I said. James Wren. Right. Of course. She folded her hands on the table, and I noticed her wedding ring was gone, both of them. Thank you for agreeing to see me. You got 15 minutes. Kevin, James, I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. But what I did, it wasn't about you not being good enough. It was about me being scared. I sipped my coffee and waited. I was scared that if I didn't leave, I'd never become the person I was supposed to be. I'd just be Kevin Miller's wife forever, and I wanted more than that. You got more. Did I? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 2 failed marriages, 3 failed businesses, and a credit score that makes landlords hang up on me. Is that more? You tell me. Natalie leaned forward. I made a mistake, Kevin. A huge mistake. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was too stupid and scared to recognize what I had. What you had was a husband who worked 60-hour weeks to pay for your education. I know that now. You knew it then, you just didn't care. She flinched. That's not fair. Fair? I set down my coffee cup. Natalie, you handed me divorce papers on your graduation night. You laughed when I drove away. You told me I was a placeholder, a stepping stone to something better. And now you want to talk about fair? I was young. I was stupid. You were exactly who you chose to be. I leaned back in my chair. And I was exactly who you thought I was. A blue-collar nobody with grease under his fingernails and no ambition beyond his next paycheck. That's not true, isn't it? In 5 years of marriage, did you ever once ask about my work, my projects, my plans for the future? She opened her mouth, then closed it. You didn't know about the patents because you never cared enough to ask. You didn't know about the holding company because my dreams were invisible to you. You married Kevin Miller, the factory worker, and divorced Kevin Miller, the factory worker, and you never once wondered if there might be more to the story. But there was more, she said quietly. You became James Wren. You became successful. I was always James Wren. I just needed you to leave before I could become him. The words hit her like a physical blow. She sat back in her chair, and for a moment I thought she might cry. So this is it? She asked. This is how it ends? This is how it ended 10 years ago. This is just me explaining it to you. Kevin, I'm broke. I'm alone. I'm about to lose everything. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Are you really sorry? Or are you enjoying this? I considered the question seriously. Was I enjoying watching the woman who'd destroyed my life beg for scraps from the fortune she'd never known existed? Was there satisfaction in seeing her reduced to calling her ex-husband for money? No, I said finally. I'm not enjoying this, but I'm not responsible for fixing it either. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm just asking for help, enough to get back on my feet. Why? Because we were married. Because I supported you. You supported me? I laughed. Natalie, I worked nights for 5 years while you went to school. I paid your tuition, your books, your living expenses. I deferred my own education so you could get yours. The only thing you supported was the idea that I wasn't good enough for the life you wanted. That's not how I remember it. That's not how it happened. She stared at me for a long moment. You've changed. Yes, you used to be kind. I used to be a lot of things, naive, trusting, willing to sacrifice everything for someone who saw me as a temporary inconvenience. And now? Now I'm successful. Now I'm wealthy. Now I'm everything you thought you wanted in a husband, except I'm not your husband anymore. Natalie reached across the table and touched my hand. We could try again. We could. I pulled my hand away. No. Why not? Because you didn't fall in love with James Wren. You fell in love with James Wren's bank account. She sat back like I'd slapped her. That's not true, isn't it? 10 years of silence, and you only found me after your lawyer discovered I was worth money. If I were still Kevin Miller, the factory worker, would you be here? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I stood up and pulled a $20 bill from my wallet. This should cover the coffee. Kevin, wait. Goodbye, Natalie. Kevin, please. I'm begging you. I stopped at the door and looked back at her. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd handed me divorce papers 10 years ago. You graduated me, Natalie, I said. Best education I ever got. I walked out to my truck and drove back to Cedar Falls, leaving her sitting alone in the coffee shop with her tears and her regrets and the bill for a conversation that had been 10 years overdue. My phone stayed silent after that. No more calls from Sarah Chen. No more voicemails from Natalie. No more attempts to claim a piece of the life she'd never wanted when it was hers for free. 3 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd moved back in with her mother in Portland. 6 months after that, I heard she'd gotten a job as an administrative assistant at a small accounting firm. I felt nothing hearing the news. No satisfaction, no sympathy, no residual connection to the woman who'd once shared my bed and my dreams. She'd become what she'd always been in her mind, a stranger who'd briefly shared my life before moving on to something she thought was better. The difference was that now I understood the truth. She hadn't moved on to something better. She'd moved on from something better and spent 10 years learning the difference. I went back to my workshop and my patents and my quiet life in Cedar Falls, where nobody knew Kevin Miller had ever existed, and James Wren was just the successful guy who lived outside town and minded his own business. Sometimes, late at night when the wind howled across the Montana plains, I thought about the roads not taken. What if I'd fought for the marriage? What if I'd shown her the patents, proved I was more than she thought I was? But those thoughts never lasted long. Natalie hadn't left because she thought I lacked potential. She'd left because she thought she deserved better than whatever I could become. And in the end, she'd been right about one thing. She had outgrown me. She'd just been wrong about what that meant. 2 years after our coffee shop meeting, I was worth $94 million. The number appeared on my quarterly financial statement like a milestone I'd never intended to reach. $94 million, built from patents and licensing deals and smart investments, accumulated by a man who'd once counted quarters to buy groceries while his wife studied for her MBA. I set the statement aside and went back to work on my latest project, a water purification system that could provide clean drinking water for refugee camps. Not because it would make money, but because it needed to exist. That's when the letter arrived. Not an email or a phone call, but an actual letter, delivered by certified mail to my office in Cedar Falls. The return address was a law firm in Seattle I didn't recognize. Inside, 3 pages of legal letterhead and corporate language that boiled down to a simple message. Natalie wanted half of everything. Her new attorney, apparently Sarah Chen, had declined to pursue the case further, laid out a theory of partnership contribution and unjust enrichment. The argument was that Natalie's emotional support and sacrifice during our marriage had contributed to my subsequent success, entitling her to compensation. The letter mentioned her significant personal investment in Kevin Miller's education and career development, and her role as primary breadwinner during crucial formative years. I read it twice, then called my own attorney. "James, this is frivolous," said Rebecca Martinez, the sharp-eyed lawyer who'd been handling my business affairs for 8 years. "She has no claim to assets acquired after the divorce." "I know that, but I want you to do something for me." "What?" "I want you to prepare a counterclaim. Educational support, opportunity cost, interest compounded over 12 years, everything I spent on her MBA, plus what I could have earned if I'd been investing in my own career instead of hers." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "James, that's aggressive and probably unnecessary. We can get this dismissed without— How much would it be? The counterclaim? Let me run the numbers." She called back an hour later. "Assuming market rate tuition, living expenses, and opportunity cost calculated at average engineering salary progression, $247,000. File it. James, file it today." 3 weeks later, Natalie's attorney withdrew from the case, apparently when faced with the possibility that their client might end up owing money instead of receiving it. The law firm decided the case wasn't worth pursuing on contingency. But Natalie didn't give up. She started calling again. Not 169 calls in a week this time, but steady, persistent attempts to reach me. When I blocked her numbers, she found new ones. When I stopped answering unknown calls, she started leaving voicemails. "Kevin, this is insane. You know I can't pay $247,000. Kevin, I'm sorry about the lawsuit. My attorney said it was worth trying, but I never wanted to hurt you. Kevin, can we please just talk? Like adults? Like people who used to love each other?" I listened to exactly one of these messages, then deleted the rest without playing them. Finally, she tried a different approach. She contacted Dave Kowalski at the gym in Cedar Falls, somehow tracking down one of the few people who knew both Kevin Miller and James Wren were the same person. "She says she's your ex-wife," Dave told me after my workout. "Says she needs to see you. Says it's important." "What did you tell her?" "Told her I'd pass along the message. But James, she sounded desperate. Like really desperate." "That's not my problem." "Maybe not, but she's driving up here anyway. Says she'll wait outside your house until you talk to her." The thought of Natalie camping outside my property, turning my quiet life into a circus, made my jaw clench. When? Tomorrow. That night, I sat in my workshop and thought about the woman I'd married 15 years ago. Young, ambitious, beautiful in the way that comes from believing the world owes you something special. She'd seen me as a stepping stone to a better life, and when she'd stepped high enough, she'd kicked the stone away. Now she was falling, and she wanted to grab onto the same stone she'd discarded. The next morning, I was waiting in my driveway when her rental car pulled up. She looked worse than she had at the coffee shop. Thinner, older, wearing the kind of cheap clothes that come from shopping at discount stores instead of boutiques. Her hair was shorter, graying at the roots, and her face had the hollow look of someone who'd been skipping meals. Kevin. She got out of the car slowly, like her bones hurt. Thank you for seeing me. I'm not seeing you. I'm telling you to leave. Please. Just 5 minutes. You had 15 years to talk to me. You chose not to. I was wrong. She took a step closer and I could see the desperation in her eyes. About everything. About you. About us. About what mattered. I was so wrong and I'm sorry. Apology noted. Now leave. Kevin, I'm homeless. The words hit the air between us like a confession. What? I lost my apartment 3 months ago. I've been staying in my car, in shelters, wherever I can. I lost my job. I can't make my student loan payments, and my credit is so bad I can't even rent a room. I stared at her. What about your mother? She died last year. Cancer. I spent her life insurance on medical bills. Your friends? What friends? Maya hasn't spoken to me since I couldn't pay back the money she loaned me. Graham's in prison for securities fraud. Marcus remarried and moved to Florida. She stood there in my driveway. This woman who'd once told me I wasn't good enough for her ambitions, and I realized she was telling the truth. She had nothing left. That's unfortunate, I said, but it's not my responsibility. I know that. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But Kevin, I'm desperate. I just need enough money to get back on my feet. A few $1,000s. I'll pay you back, I swear. With what? You just told me you're unemployed and homeless. I'll find a way. Like you found a way to appreciate what you had when you had it? She flinched. I deserved that. You deserved a lot of things. A husband who loved you, a marriage that could have been a real partnership, a chance to build something together instead of using someone as a stepping stone. I know, but you threw it all away because you thought you deserved better. I was young and stupid, and you were 33 years old, Natalie. You weren't young. You were selfish. Tears started running down her cheeks. I know, you're right. I was selfish and horrible, and I destroyed the best thing in my life. But Kevin, I'm begging you. I have nowhere else to go. I looked at her standing there in my driveway, crying in her discount store clothes, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy, no residual love. Just the cold satisfaction of a lesson finally learned. You graduated me, remember? I said. You told me I was a placeholder, a stepping stone, an investment that didn't pan out. You laughed when I drove away. I was wrong. No, you were honest. Maybe for the first time in our marriage, you told me exactly what you thought of me. Kevin, please. You know what the funny thing is? You were right about one thing. I did outgrow that life. I outgrew the man who would work 60 hours a week to pay for someone else's dreams. I outgrew the man who would accept being treated like hired help in his own marriage. I never treated you like... You introduced me to your classmates as my husband. He's supporting me through school, like I was a scholarship program instead of a partner. I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did, and that's fine. It taught me something important. What? That some investments don't pay off, and when they don't, you cut your losses and move on. I turned and walked toward my house. Kevin, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around. What am I supposed to do? Whatever people do when they run out of other people's money. I'll die out here. Then you should have thought of that before you decided I wasn't worth staying married to. I went inside and closed the door. Through the window, I watched her stand in my driveway for another 10 minutes, crying and probably hoping I'd change my mind. Finally, she got back in her rental car and drove away. I never saw her again. 6 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd gotten a job as a night shift security guard in Portland. A year after that, I heard she was working at a call center, living in a studio apartment, and taking the bus to work. I felt nothing hearing these updates. No satisfaction, no regret, no curiosity about how her story would end. She'd become what she'd always been, someone else's problem. I went back to my patents and my inventions and my quiet life in Montana, where James Wren was building a fortune and Kevin Miller was just a name on old marriage certificates that nobody would ever see. The water purification system I'd been working on went into production that fall. By Christmas, it was providing clean water to refugee camps in 3 countries. The patent licensing fees alone were enough to fund a dozen more humanitarian projects. On New Year's Eve, I sat in my workshop and calculated my net worth, $127 million and climbing. Not bad for a blue-collar nobody who wasn't worth staying married to. I raised a glass of bourbon to the empty workshop and made a toast. To the best education I ever got. Outside, snow was falling on the Montana plains, covering everything in pristine white. A blank slate, a fresh start. The kind of new beginning you can only get when you finally learn to stop carrying other people's baggage. I finished my bourbon and went back to work. There were patents to file, innovations to develop, and a world full of problems that needed solving by someone who'd learned the difference between supporting people and being used by them. Somewhere in Portland, my ex-wife was probably working the night shift, answering phones for $8 an hour and wondering how her life had gone so wrong. But that was her story to finish. Mine was just beginning.